The call came during the middle of my shift, my phone buzzing insistently in my pocket while I was running diagnostics on the communications array. I ignored it the first time, then the second. By the third call, I knew something was wrong. No one called 3 times in a row unless it was an emergency. I stepped away from my station and checked the screen. Valerie, my stepmother, never called me. In the 5 years since she married my father, I could count on one hand the number of times we had spoken directly on the phone. Our communication went through my father, the way it had since she first appeared in his life, and made it clear that I was an inconvenience she tolerated rather than a stepdaughter she welcomed. Hello? Dominique. Her voice was clipped, businesslike. Your father is sick. Lung cancer. Stage 3. The words hit me like a physical blow. My father, Leonard Harrison, was the strongest man I knew. He had raised me alone after my mother died of an aneurysm when I was 14, had worked double shifts as a high school history teacher to save for my college fund, had held me together through the worst years of my life. The idea of him with cancer, of him being sick at all, seemed impossible. I need to come home. The words came out before I could think. I'll request emergency leave. I can be there in 2 days. That's not necessary. Valerie's tone was dismissive. He's starting treatment next week. The doctors say the prognosis is manageable. You don't need to drop everything and fly across the country. He's my father. Of course I need to be there. Leonard specifically asked me to tell you not to worry. He doesn't want to disrupt your career over something that might not be serious. There was something in her voice, something I could not quite identify. I'll keep you updated. For now, just focus on your work. She hung up before I could argue. I stood in the corridor of the communications center at Pearl Harbor, staring at my phone, trying to process what I had just heard. My father had cancer. He had asked me not to come home. Neither of those things made sense. I called back immediately, but the phone went to voicemail. I tried again an hour later, then again that evening, then 3 times the next day. Every call went unanswered. I sent text messages that were never returned. I sent emails that disappeared into a void. After a week of silence, I managed to reach the house phone during a time I knew my father should be awake. Harrison residence. Valerie's voice again. I need to speak to my father, please. He's resting. The chemotherapy is exhausting him. Then I'll wait on the line until he wakes up. That could be hours, Dominique. He needs his sleep. A pause, a sigh. Look, I know you're concerned, but you have to understand that Leonard is very weak right now. Talking on the phone drains him. The best thing you can do is give him space to recover. I'm his daughter. I should be there with him. And I'm his wife. I'm taking care of him. That's what matters. Another pause. He asked me to tell you not to worry. He'll call you when he's feeling stronger. But he never called. Days turned into weeks, and weeks stretched into months, and every attempt I made to reach my father was blocked, deflected, or ignored. I sent letters, carefully written messages of love and support, and received no response. I sent care packages through the mail, never knowing if they arrived. I called at every possible hour, hoping to catch my father awake and near the phone. But Valerie was always there, always answering, always with an excuse. He's at the hospital for treatment. He's sleeping off the side effects. The doctor said he shouldn't be stressed. Emotional conversations are too much right now. He's doing better. He'll reach out when he's ready. The excuses were always reasonable, always delivered with just enough concern in her voice to sound believable. But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, a deep unease that grew stronger with each passing week. I requested emergency leave twice. Both times, Valerie convinced me to cancel it. Leonard is stable, she said the first time. There's no emergency. You'd be wasting your leave for nothing. He's in the middle of a treatment cycle, she said the second time. He can barely keep his eyes open. You'd fly all the way here just to watch him sleep. Wait until he's stronger. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Because the alternative, that my father's wife was deliberately keeping us apart, seemed too cruel to be real. The months of silence weighed on me like a physical burden. I threw myself into my work, spending extra hours at my station, volunteering for every additional duty that would keep my mind occupied. My colleagues noticed the change, the shadows under my eyes, the distraction in my manner. but they attributed it to worry about a sick parent, which was partly true. They did not know about the deeper fear, the growing certainty that something was being hidden from me. It was Commander Chen who finally broke through my isolation. Marcus Chen was my direct superior officer, a decade older than me and several ranks above. He was respected throughout the command for his fairness and his attention to the sailors under his supervision. But our interactions had always been strictly professional, the normal exchanges between an officer and an enlisted sailor. So when he called me into his office one afternoon, closing the door behind me with unusual solemnity, I assumed I was in trouble. I ran through my recent work in my mind, searching for errors or oversights that might have caught his attention. "Petty Officer Harrison, please sit down." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "This isn't about your work. Your performance has been exemplary, as always." I sat, confused and increasingly anxious. "Then what is this about, sir?" Commander Chen studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He was a handsome man, with the kind of calm presence that commanded respect without demanding it. I had always liked him, had felt comfortable serving under his command, but I had never seen him look at me the way he was looking at me now, with something that seemed almost like grief. "Petty Officer Harrison, I need to ask you some questions about your father." "Leonard Harrison, correct?" "Yes, sir." My heart began to pound. "Is something wrong? Is he—" "When was the last time you spoke to him directly?" I tried to remember. 4 months ago, maybe 5. Before his diagnosis. Since then, I've only been able to reach my stepmother. She says he's too weak to talk. Commander Chen nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. "And you've been trying to reach him? Calling? Writing?" "Every day, sir. I've sent letters, packages, emails. I've called dozens of times. But nothing gets through." My voice cracked slightly. "I don't understand what's happening. My father would never just stop talking to me. We were close. We talked every week before he got sick." "I know you were close." Chen's voice was gentle. "Your father told me." I stared at him, uncomprehending. "My father told you? You know my father?" "I've known Leonard Harrison my entire life." Commander Chen leaned forward, his expression intense. "He was my father's best friend. They grew up together in Baltimore, were in each other's weddings, were practically brothers. Leonard is my godfather." The words took a moment to register. My father had never mentioned knowing anyone in the Navy, let alone an officer at Pearl Harbor. But then again, my father had a network of friendships that stretched back decades, connections I had never fully mapped. "I don't understand," I said. "If you know my father, why are you telling me now? Why haven't you mentioned this before?" "Because your father asked me not to. When you first arrived at Pearl Harbor, he contacted me and asked me to look out for you, but from a distance. He didn't want you to feel like you were being watched or protected. He wanted you to succeed on your own merits." Chen paused. "But things have changed. Your father reached out to me 5 months ago, when he first got sick. He had something important to tell me, something you need to know." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear his words. "What did he tell you?" Commander Chen opened a drawer in his desk and removed a thick folder. "He told me that his wife has been intercepting your communications. Every letter you sent, every call you made, every email, Valerie has been blocking them. Your father never received any of them?" The floor seemed to shift beneath me. "That's not possible. She said he was too weak to talk. She said she lied." Chen's voice was flat, certain. "Your father didn't know you were trying to reach him until 2 months ago. He thought you had abandoned him, that you were too busy with your career to care about a dying man." Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and unstoppable. "I would never abandon him. He's my father. He's everything to me. He knows that now?" Chen pushed the folder across the desk. "He discovered the truth by accident. He found one of your letters in the trash, torn up and discarded. After that, he started paying attention. He realized that Valerie had been lying to both of you, telling you he was too sick to talk while telling him that you never called." I took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were printed emails, dated over the past 5 months, all from my father to Commander Chen. The first one was tentative, asking for help to understand why his daughter had stopped communicating. The later ones were increasingly desperate, documenting Valerie's deception, recording every lie she told. He couldn't confront her directly, Chen explained. He was too weak, too dependent on her for his care, and he was afraid that if he accused her, she would cut him off from the outside world completely. So he reached out to the one person he knew could help. Me. I flipped through the pages, my tears blurring the words. My father's voice emerged from the emails, familiar and beloved and heartbreaking. Marcus, I found another letter from Nikki today. Valerie had hidden it in her car. My daughter has been writing to me every week and I never knew. I thought she had forgotten about me. I thought the Navy had replaced her family in her heart. But she never stopped loving me. Valerie just made sure I couldn't see it. Please tell Nikki I'm sorry. I should have known. I should have trusted my daughter. Instead, I believed the lies of a woman I should never have married. I'm getting weaker. The doctors don't think I have much time. But I need Nikki to know the truth. Please, Marcus. When I'm gone, tell her everything. Show her these emails. Make sure she knows I never stopped loving her. I looked up at Commander Chen, my face wet with tears. Is my father? Chen's expression told me everything before he spoke the words. I received word this morning. Your father passed away last night. I'm so sorry, Petty Officer Harrison. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I had to verify the information. He paused. There's more you need to know. Your stepmother is already telling people that you abandoned your father during his illness. She's spreading lies about you to your entire family. The grief and the rage hit me simultaneously, a wave of emotion so powerful I could barely breathe. My father was dead. I had never gotten to say goodbye. And now, the woman who had stolen our final months together was trying to destroy my reputation as well. There's something else, Chen said quietly. Your father left something for you. Videos he recorded in his final weeks, messages he wanted you to have, and instructions about his will, his true wishes, that contradict whatever Valerie might claim. He removed a USB drive from the folder and placed it on the desk between us. Your father was a smart man, Petty Officer Harrison. He knew he was dying, and he knew what Valerie was. He made sure the truth would come out, one way or another. Chen met my eyes with a steady gaze. And I'm going to help you make sure everyone knows it. I sat in Commander Chen's office for hours that night, watching the videos my father had recorded in his final weeks. Each one was a knife to my heart and a balm to my soul simultaneously, grief and love and rage swirling together until I could barely distinguish one from another. The first video was dated 4 months ago, recorded on what appeared to be a laptop webcam. My father looked thin, diminished, his brown skin carrying an ashen undertone that I had never seen before. But his eyes were clear, and his voice, though weaker than I remembered, was steady. Hey, baby girl, it's Daddy. He smiled, and I felt my heart crack. I'm recording this because I need you to know the truth, in case I don't get a chance to tell you in person. He paused, gathering his breath. I could see the effort it took just to speak. I know now that you've been trying to reach me. I know you've been calling and writing and doing everything you could to talk to your old man. And I know that I never got any of it because Valerie made sure I wouldn't. He shook his head slowly, a gesture of profound regret. I'm ashamed to say I believed her at first. When you didn't call, when the letters stopped coming, she told me you were too busy. She said the Navy was your family now, that you'd moved on. And I was sick and scared and desperate to believe that my wife was on my side. So I let myself believe it. Tears were streaming down his face now, matching the tears on my own. But then I found one of your letters in the trash. It was crumpled up and torn, but I could still read the words. Dear Daddy, I'm so worried about you. Please call me. I love you so much. That's what you wrote, baby. And Valerie threw it away like it was garbage. He wiped his eyes with a trembling hand. I realized then that I'd married a monster. A woman who would keep a dying man from his only daughter, who would make both of us suffer for reasons I still don't fully understand. Maybe she wants my money. Maybe she wants to be the only one who matters in my life. I don't know, but I know I can't let her win. The video continued for another 10 minutes, my father explaining his plan. He would reach out to Marcus Chen, the son of his oldest friend, the one person he could trust to deliver the truth. He would document everything. Every lie Valerie told, every piece of evidence he could gather. And when he was gone, Marcus would make sure I knew what really happened. I'm so sorry, Nikki. My father used the nickname he had given me as a child, the name that only he was allowed to use. I'm sorry I won't be there to watch you grow into the woman I know you'll become. I'm sorry our last months were stolen from us. I'm sorry I didn't see through Valerie sooner. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. But I want you to know that I have always loved you. Every day, every moment, from the second you were born to the last breath I take, you are my heart, Nikki. You are the best thing I ever did in this world. And no one, not Valerie, not anyone, can ever take that away from us. The video ended, and I sat in silence, my face wet with tears, my chest aching with a grief so profound I could barely breathe. Commander Chen gave me time to compose myself before speaking. There are 12 more videos. Your father recorded them over the last 3 months of his life. Some are messages for you, some are documentation of Valerie's behavior, and one, the last one, is his testimony about his true wishes for his estate. I nodded, unable to speak. He also sent me copies of his original will, the one he made before he married Valerie. In that document, you are the sole beneficiary of everything he owned. The house, his savings, his pension, all of it goes to you. But Valerie apparently pressured him to create a new will after they married, one that left everything to her. Your father signed it under duress, when he was already sick and dependent on her care. Chen's expression hardened. But he also documented that pressure. He has video and audio recordings of Valerie threatening to withhold his medication if he didn't comply. I stared at him, the horror of the situation becoming clearer with each revelation. She was blackmailing him? In essence, yes. She controlled his access to his medication, his phone, his mail, his connection to the outside world. He was a prisoner in his own home, too weak to fight back, with no one to help him. Chen paused, until he reached out to me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? The question came out harsher than I intended. If you've known for months that my father was being mistreated, why did you wait? Chen accepted my anger without flinching. Your father asked me to wait. He was afraid that if Valerie knew he had found a way around her blockade, she would cut him off completely. He wanted to gather as much evidence as possible before she realized what was happening. His voice softened. And he wanted to live as long as he could, Nikki. He knew that once the truth came out, there would be conflict and stress. He wanted to spare himself that until the end. I understood even through my anger. My father had been thinking strategically, using the time he had left to build a case against the woman who was tormenting him. He had sacrificed our final months together to ensure that the truth would survive him. What happens now? Now we go to Baltimore. Chen straightened in his chair. The funeral is in 3 days. Valerie has been telling everyone that you abandoned your father, that you never called or visited, that you didn't care he was dying. Your entire family believes her. My family? I thought of Aunt Regina, my father's sister, who had been a second mother to me after my own mother died. Of my cousins, who I had grown up with, who had been at every birthday and holiday of my childhood. The idea that they all believed I had abandoned my father was unbearable. Your father warned me this would happen. He knew Valerie would try to poison your relationships after he was gone. Chen stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Pacific. That's why he wanted me to be there, to testify, to show them the evidence, to make sure you're not alone when you face her. You would do that? Come to the funeral? He turned to face me. Your father was my godfather, Petty Officer Harrison. He was the closest thing I had to a second father after my own dad died. He called me from his deathbed to ask me to protect his daughter. His eyes met mine with fierce determination. I would fly to the ends of the earth to honor that request. We spent the next 2 days preparing. Chen arranged emergency leave for both of us, using connections I didn't know he had to expedite the paperwork. He helped me organize the evidence my father had gathered, creating a presentation that would be undeniable. He coached me on what to expect, on how to stay calm in the face of accusations I knew were coming. Valerie will try to turn this into a confrontation, he warned. She'll attack your character, question your motives, paint you as the villain. Don't let her control the narrative. Stay focused on the facts. Let the evidence speak for itself. The night before we left for Baltimore, I watched all 12 of my father's videos, one after another, absorbing every word, every expression, every moment of connection that Valerie had tried to steal from me. The final video was the hardest. Recorded just 4 days before his death, my father was visibly failing, his voice barely above a whisper, his hands trembling as he held the camera. "This is my last message, baby girl. I can feel myself slipping away, and I want to make sure I say everything that matters." He paused, gathering strength. "You are not what Valerie will say you are. You did not abandon me. You loved me, and you tried to reach me, and you were blocked at every turn by a woman who saw me as nothing but a source of money. Don't let her lies become your truth." Another pause, longer this time. "Marcus Chen is a good man. His father was my best friend for 40 years, and the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Trust him. Let him help you. And when this is all over, when Valerie is exposed and the truth is known, live your life without looking back." Tears were streaming down his face, matching the ones streaming down mine. "I love you, Nikki. I have loved you since before you were born, and I will love you long after I'm gone. Carry that with you, baby. Carry it always." He reached toward the camera as if to touch my face through the screen. "Goodbye, sweetheart, until we meet again." The video ended. I sat in the darkness of my barracks room and wept, clutching the USB drive that held my father's final words, grieving for the man I had lost and the time we had been denied. But beneath the grief, something else was growing. A cold, clear resolve that matched the determination my father had shown in his final months. Valerie had stolen our goodbye. She had poisoned my family against me. She had tried to rewrite history to make herself the victim and me the villain. She had made a terrible mistake. Because now I had the truth. And I had Commander Marcus Chen by my side. And I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of woman Valerie really was. The flight from Honolulu to Baltimore was the longest of my life, despite Commander Chen's steady presence beside me. I spent the hours reviewing the evidence folder, memorizing the timeline of my father's communications, preparing myself for what lay ahead. Chen had printed out every email my father had sent him, organized chronologically and annotated with explanations. The earliest messages were confused and hurt, my father struggling to understand why his daughter had suddenly stopped communicating. The later ones were angry, determined, as he discovered the scope of Valerie's deception and began planning his counterattack. One email in particular stayed with me. "Marcus, I found the phone records today. Nikki called this house 47 times in the past 2 months. 47 calls, and Valerie told me there were none. She looked me in the eye and said my daughter had forgotten about me, and she had proof right there in her call log that she was lying. I asked her about it. Told her I wanted to check the phone records myself. She said she'd already deleted them, that there was nothing to see. But I had already found them. I took pictures with my old digital camera, the one she doesn't know I have. I'm dying, Marcus. I know that. But I'm not going to let Valerie win. I'm not going to let her steal my daughter's reputation the way she tried to steal our relationship. When I'm gone, please make sure the truth comes out. Please." I read that email 3 times during the flight, each time feeling the same surge of grief and admiration. My father had been fighting for me even as he was dying. He had found ways around Valerie's control, had gathered evidence despite his weakness, had reached out to the one person who could help. He had never stopped being my father, even when Valerie tried to make us both believe he had. Chen must have noticed my expression, because he reached over and squeezed my hand briefly. "He was a remarkable man, your father. I've known a lot of people in my life, but I've never known anyone with more integrity than Leonard Harrison." "How did you know him?" "Really know him, I mean, beyond being your godfather." Chen settled back in his seat, a small smile crossing his face. "My father and your father were inseparable as kids. They grew up on the same block in Baltimore, went to the same schools, got into the same trouble. When my dad married my mom, a Chinese-American woman he met at Hopkins, Leonard was his best man. And when I was born, Leonard was the first person my dad called after my mom. I never knew any of this. Your father didn't want to put pressure on our relationship. He knew you'd be serving under my command, and he wanted you to succeed on your own merits." Chen paused. "But he always asked about you in our private conversations. how you were doing, whether you were happy, whether you needed anything. He was so proud of you, Nikki. More proud than you could possibly know. The tears came again, softer this time. He never told me he was in contact with you. He wanted to, but he also wanted to respect your independence. You joined the Navy to build your own life, and he didn't want you to feel like you were being watched. Chen's voice grew heavy. When he got sick, when Valerie started her campaign, he called me in a panic. He said something was wrong with Nikki. He said you had stopped calling, stopped writing, stopped caring. He wanted me to find out what was happening. And you believed him? Not at first. I checked on you, discreetly, and you seemed fine. Busy, focused on your work, but fine. I told Leonard that you were probably just adjusting to deployment stress, that you'd reach out when you could. Chen shook his head. I was wrong. By the time Leonard figured out what Valerie was doing, I had already dismissed his concerns. I'll never forgive myself for that. I touched his arm, offering comfort that I barely had to spare. You couldn't have known. Valerie fooled everyone. Not everyone. His jaw tightened. Not forever. We landed in Baltimore as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The funeral was tomorrow, and I had less than 12 hours to prepare for the battle ahead. The church where my father's funeral was held was the same church where I had been baptized, where my parents had been married, where 3 generations of Harrisons had gathered to celebrate and mourn. I had not been inside these walls in over 2 years, not since the last Christmas I had spent at home before being stationed in Hawaii. Walking through the heavy wooden doors now, in my dress uniform with Commander Chen beside me, felt like entering enemy territory. The sanctuary was already full when we arrived, rows of pews filled with faces both familiar and strange. I recognized relatives I had not seen in years, Aunt Regina in the front row, my cousins Marcus and Denise beside her, Uncle Jerome and his wife further back. There were also people I did not know, friends of Valerie's perhaps, white faces interspersed among the predominantly black congregation. And there was Valerie herself, holding court at the front of the church, dressed in elegant black, accepting condolences with the practiced grace of a woman who had been preparing for this moment. She saw me the moment I walked in. Her expression flickered, surprise and something darker crossing her features, before she arranged her face into a mask of wounded dignity. Dominique. She said my name like an accusation. You came. He was my father. I kept my voice steady, though it cost me everything. Of course I came. We didn't expect you. Her tone carried an edge of poison. You were so busy during his illness. We assumed the funeral would be the same. Before I could respond, Aunt Regina appeared at my side. My father's sister had always been a fierce presence, a woman who spoke her mind and brooked no nonsense. But the look she gave me now was cold, distant, nothing like the warmth I remembered. Nikki? She did not embrace me. I'm surprised you bothered to show up. Aunt Regina, I tried to reach Dad. I called dozens of times. That's not what Valerie says. My aunt's voice was flat. She says she begged you to come home and you refused. She says your father cried himself to sleep, wondering why his daughter had abandoned him. That's a lie. The words burst out of me. Valerie blocked every call, every letter. I tried for months. Save it. Aunt Regina turned away. I don't know what happened to you, Nikki, but you're not the girl I raised. Leonard deserved better than a daughter who couldn't be bothered to say goodbye. She walked away before I could respond, joining the cluster of relatives who were watching me with expressions ranging from hurt to hostile. The message was clear. I was the villain of this story, and no one wanted to hear my side. Commander Chen touched my elbow. Stay calm. Remember what we discussed? I nodded, swallowing the rage that threatened to overwhelm me. This was Valerie's design, her careful construction. She had spent months preparing for this moment, planting seeds of doubt and accusation, making sure that when I finally appeared, I would be met with rejection. The funeral service was a performance worthy of a Broadway production. The pastor, a man I did not recognize, spoke eloquently about Leonard Harrison's devoted wife, the woman who had nursed him through his illness with tireless love. He mentioned Leonard's daughter in passing, noting only that she served in the Navy far from home. Valerie delivered the eulogy herself, a masterpiece of manipulation. She spoke about her husband's final months, about holding his hand through chemotherapy, about late nights by his bedside when he called out for his daughter who never came. Leonard loved Dominique more than anything, Valerie said, her voice cracking with practiced emotion. He waited for her call every day. He asked me to check the phone, to check the mail, to see if she had written, and every day I had to tell him that there was nothing. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I tried to reach her. I called, I texted, I begged, but she was always too busy. Her career was more important than her dying father. I watched the congregation absorb these lies, saw my family members nodding in sympathetic agreement, felt the weight of their judgment crushing me. This was what Valerie had built, a narrative so complete, so convincing, that even the people who had known me my entire life believed it without question. The service ended, and I found myself surrounded by relatives who wanted to confront me. My cousin Marcus, who I had played with as a child, asked how I could live with myself. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's best friend, said she was ashamed of what I had become. Even Uncle Jerome, the kindest man in our family, shook his head and walked away without a word. I stood alone in a sea of people who had once loved me, feeling the full weight of Valerie's destruction. She had not just stolen my father's final months, she had stolen my family. Then Commander Chen stepped forward. He had been standing at the back of the church during the service, observing without participating, waiting for the right moment. Now he walked to the front of the sanctuary with the purposeful stride of an officer accustomed to command, his dress uniform lending him an authority that made people step aside. "Excuse me." His voice carried through the room, strong and clear. "My name is Commander Marcus Chen, United States Navy. I was Leonard Harrison's godson, and I have something to say about what really happened during his illness." The room went silent. Valerie's expression shifted from confident to wary. "I knew Leonard Harrison for 38 years, Chen continued. "He was my father's best friend, my godfather, and one of the finest men I have ever known. And I can tell you, with absolute certainty, that everything you have heard today about his daughter is a lie." A murmur rippled through the congregation. Aunt Regina stepped forward. "Who are you to come here and—" "I'm the person Leonard trusted with the truth." Chen held up a folder. "For the last 5 months of his life, Leonard was in contact with me. He reached out because he discovered that his wife was intercepting all communication between him and his daughter. He asked me to document everything, to keep his messages safe, and to reveal the truth after his death." He opened the folder and removed a sheaf of papers. "These are emails from Leonard, describing how Valerie blocked Dominique's calls and hid her letters. These are phone records showing that Dominique called this house over 50 times in the past 6 months, calls that Valerie never answered. And this," he held up a USB drive, "contains video messages Leonard recorded for his daughter, explaining everything that happened." The room had gone completely still. Valerie was pale, her composure cracking. Leonard Harrison did not die thinking his daughter had abandoned him. Chen's voice was iron. He died knowing the truth, that his wife had deliberately sabotaged his relationship with his child, had lied to him and to her, had stolen their final months together out of greed and spite. He turned to face the congregation directly. "Leonard asked me to do one thing above all else, to make sure his daughter was not blamed for something she did not do. I intend to honor that request." He looked at Valerie, his expression cold. "And I intend to make sure everyone here knows exactly what kind of woman you really are." The silence in the church was absolute. Every eye was fixed on Commander Chen, on the folder in his hands, on the USB drive that contained my father's voice from beyond the grave. Valerie was the first to recover. "This is absurd," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "I don't know who this man is or why he's making these accusations, but—" "These aren't accusations," Chen interrupted. "These are facts. Documented facts that Leonard Harrison gathered over 5 months because he knew his wife was lying and he wanted to protect his daughter from her slander." He turned to Aunt Regina. "Mrs. Williams, I understand why you believed Valerie's story. She's a convincing liar, and you had no reason to doubt her. But Leonard was my godfather. I have known him since I was born. And I can tell you that he reached out to me in desperation because he had discovered that his wife was keeping him isolated from his own daughter. He handed her the folder. Read the emails. They're in Leonard's own words. He describes finding Nikki's letters in the trash. He describes overhearing Valerie tell him that Nikki never called, when the phone records prove she called dozens of times. He describes the exact lies Valerie told him to convince him that his daughter had abandoned him. Aunt Regina took the folder with trembling hands. I watched her begin to read, her expression shifting from skepticism to confusion to dawning horror. "This is Leonard's handwriting," she said quietly. "These email addresses are his?" "They are. I verified them through multiple channels before coming here." Chen's voice was firm but not unkind. "Your brother knew he was dying, Mrs. Williams. He spent his final months making sure the truth would survive him. He didn't do that for his own sake. He did it because he loved his daughter, and he knew Valerie would try to destroy her after he was gone." The congregation began to stir, people moving closer to look at the evidence, murmuring to each other in shocked tones. I saw my cousin Denise pick up one of the printouts and begin reading, her hand covering her mouth in horror. Uncle Jerome was examining the phone records, his expression darkening with each page. Valerie tried to regain control. These documents could be forged. This man could be in league with Dominique to steal Leonard's estate. The videos can't be forged. Chen plugged the USB drive into the church's audiovisual system, the same system that had been used to show photographs during the funeral. This is Leonard himself, speaking directly to camera, telling his version of events. The screen flickered to life, and there was my father. Thinner than I remembered, weaker, but unmistakably him. His voice filled the sanctuary, scratchy and frail, but absolutely lucid. "My name is Leonard Harrison. I am recording this video because I need my family to know the truth about what happened during my illness." I watched the congregation watch my father. Aunt Regina was weeping openly. My cousins stood frozen, unable to look away. Even Valerie had gone still, her face a mask of barely contained panic. My wife, Valerie, has been telling everyone that my daughter abandoned me, that Nikki never called, never wrote, never tried to visit, that she was too busy with her Navy career to care about her dying father. My father shook his head slowly. "That is a lie. Every word of it is a lie." He held up a torn letter, the handwriting clearly visible. "This is one of the letters Nikki sent me. I found it in the trash, ripped into pieces. Valerie told me there was no mail, that Nikki had stopped writing, but she was intercepting my daughter's letters and destroying them." The video continued, my father presenting evidence after evidence of Valerie's deception. Phone records, hidden letters, overheard conversations, a pattern of manipulation so complete it took my breath away. "I don't have much time left," my father said near the end of the video, "but I wanted to make sure you all knew the truth. Nikki is not what Valerie says she is. She tried to reach me. She never stopped trying. And she was blocked at every turn by a woman who wanted to steal my money and destroy my family." He looked directly at the camera, and I felt like he was looking at me. "Nikki, baby, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see through Valerie sooner. I'm sorry we lost our last months together. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, and I never will. You are my heart, sweetheart. You always have been." The video ended. The sanctuary was absolutely silent. Then Aunt Regina stood and crossed the room to where I was standing. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around me and pulled me into a fierce embrace. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. "I'm so sorry we believed her. I should have known better. I should have trusted you." One by one, other family members approached. My cousins, my uncles, my aunts, each one offering apologies, offering embraces, offering the recognition that had been stolen from me. And through it all, Valerie stood alone at the front of the church, watching her carefully constructed narrative crumble around her. "This isn't over," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm Leonard's wife. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Chen said coolly. "And I suggest you exercise it. Because in addition to the moral evidence we've presented today, Leonard also documented instances of financial manipulation and medical neglect that may be of interest to the authorities." Valerie went pale. Without another word, she gathered her purse and walked out of the church, leaving behind a room full of people who finally knew the truth. The gathering after the funeral moved from the church to Aunt Regina's house, where the family had intended to host a reception in my father's memory. What had been planned as a celebration of his life became something else entirely. A reckoning with the truth, a collective processing of the lies they had believed, and the woman who had told them. I sat in my aunt's living room, surrounded by relatives who were still absorbing the shock of what they had witnessed. Commander Chen had excused himself to make phone calls, coordinating with legal contacts who might be needed in the days ahead. The videos played on repeat on Aunt Regina's television, family members watching and rewatching my father's testimony as if they could not quite believe what they were seeing. "I can't believe we were so blind," Uncle Jerome said, shaking his head. Valerie was so convincing. She cried at the right moments, said all the right things. We never thought to question her. "That's what manipulators do," Chen said, returning from the kitchen. "They construct a reality that serves their purposes and present it so confidently that people accept it without question. Your brother saw through her eventually, but only because he found concrete evidence of her lies." Aunt Regina was still holding the folder of emails, flipping through pages she had already read multiple times. Leonard was always a smart man. Even dying, he figured out how to fight back. He was fighting for Nikki. Chen looked at me with something like respect. Everything he did in those final months was about protecting his daughter. He knew Valerie would try to destroy her reputation, and he made sure there would be evidence to counter it. My cousin Marcus, who had earlier asked how I could live with myself, approached me with obvious discomfort. "Nikki, I don't even know what to say. The things I said to you at the church. You believed what you were told." I managed a weak smile. "I probably would have believed it too if I were in your position. But I should have known better. Your family, I've known you my whole life." He shook his head. "I'm so sorry." Similar apologies came from every corner of the room. My cousins, my aunts, my uncles, everyone who had looked at me with judgment and hostility just hours before was now struggling to process the magnitude of Valerie's deception. But the apologies, welcome as they were, could not change what had happened. I had still missed my father's final months. I had still been denied the chance to say goodbye. No amount of reconciliation could give me back what Valerie had stolen. Commander Chen seemed to sense my thoughts. "There's more we need to discuss," he said, addressing the room. Leonard didn't just document Valerie's lies about Nikki. He also left specific instructions about his will. The room grew quiet. After Leonard married Valerie, she pressured him to change his estate documents. She wanted everything, the house, the savings, the pension, left to her. Leonard resisted at first, but when he got sick, she had leverage. Chen's expression hardened. She controlled his medication, his access to doctors, his contact with the outside world. She made it clear that if he didn't comply with her wishes, she would make his final days very difficult. Aunt Regina's face went red with fury. She threatened a dying man? Leonard documented it. He has audio recordings of conversations where Valerie explicitly links his medication schedule to his compliance with her demands. Chen pulled out another USB drive. "I haven't played these publicly because they're deeply disturbing, but they exist, and they're evidence that whatever will Valerie produces was signed under duress." "So what does that mean for the estate?" Uncle Jerome asked. "It means Nikki has grounds to contest any document Valerie presents. Leonard's original will, made before his marriage to Valerie, left everything to his daughter. If we can prove the newer will was signed under duress, that original document would take precedence." I had been silent through this discussion, processing the information. "I don't care about the money," I said finally. I wanted my father back. I wanted to say goodbye." Chen nodded slowly. "I know, but Leonard cared about the money, or more precisely, about making sure Valerie didn't benefit from what she had done. He was explicit about this in his messages to me. He said that he could accept dying, could accept the loss of his final months with you, but he could not accept the idea of Valerie profiting from her cruelty." He handed me a final email, one I had not seen before. "Marcus, if I die without fixing this, please help Nikki fight for what's rightfully hers. Not because the money matters, but because Valerie cannot be allowed to win." She stole my daughter from me. She stole my peace. She stole my final months. If she also walks away with my life savings, it would be like she killed me twice. I helped build that house. I worked 30 years to save that money. It was supposed to go to my daughter, to help her build her life after the Navy, to give her the foundation I always wanted her to have. Valerie doesn't deserve a penny of it. Fight for Nikki, Marcus. Fight like I would have fought if I were still alive. Don't let that woman win. I read my father's words through a blur of tears. Even in his final days, he had been thinking about me, worrying about my future, trying to protect me from a woman who had proven herself willing to destroy everything she touched. The attorney who has Leonard's will is named Harold Washington, Chen said. He was your father's lawyer for 20 years, long before Valerie came along. Leonard reached out to him secretly and made sure there were copies of all relevant documents stored somewhere Valerie couldn't access. So there's a real will? One that Valerie doesn't know about? There's a will that Valerie doesn't control. Whether it's legally valid will be up to the courts. But Leonard did everything he could to ensure you wouldn't be left with nothing. Aunt Regina stood and placed her hand on my shoulder. Whatever happens with the legal matters, you have us. You've always had us. We forgot that for a moment, but we won't forget again. Around the room, other family members nodded their agreement. The lies Valerie had told had been exposed. The truth had been spoken. And now, the real work of rebuilding could begin. I looked at Commander Chen, at this man who had flown across the country to honor his godfather's dying wish, who had stood in a church full of strangers and declared the truth when no one else could. Thank you, I said, the words feeling inadequate for everything he had done. I don't know how to repay you. Your father was family to me. That makes you family too. Chen met my eyes with quiet intensity. I made him a promise, Nikki. I intend to keep it. The legal proceedings began the following week, after I had extended my leave and Chen had returned to Pearl Harbor with a promise to testify if needed. Attorney Harold Washington was exactly what my father had described in his emails. An old-school lawyer who had been handling the Harrison family's legal matters for decades, who had known my father since before I was born. Leonard called me about 6 months ago, Washington explained during our first meeting. He was already sick, but his mind was sharp as ever. He told me about Valerie, about the pressure she was putting on him, about the will she wanted him to sign. He asked me to prepare a countermeasure. The countermeasure was a codicil to my father's original will, a document that explicitly revoked any testamentary changes made after his diagnosis. It cited his concerns about coercion and included references to the recordings he had made of Valerie's threats. It was a legal bomb designed to detonate if Valerie tried to claim his estate. Your father was a clever man, Washington said with obvious admiration. He knew he couldn't prevent Valerie from pressuring him to sign a new will, but he could make sure that will would be challenged if he wasn't around to do it himself. Valerie, predictably, fought back. She produced a will dated 3 months before my father's death, leaving everything to her. She claimed the codicil was forged, that my father had been manipulated by outside influences, that his mental state had deteriorated too far for him to make valid legal decisions. But she could not explain the videos. She could not explain the emails. She could not explain the audio recordings of her own voice, threatening to withhold medication if my father did not comply with her demands. The hearing lasted 2 days. Commander Chen flew back to testify about his communications with my father, bringing printouts of emails and official verification of their authenticity. Aunt Regina testified about family history, about my father's character, about the sudden change in his behavior after he married Valerie. And I testified about my own attempts to reach him, about the dozens of calls that were never answered, about the letters that disappeared into silence. Valerie took the stand and tried to explain away the evidence, but her story fell apart under cross-examination. She claimed she had never intercepted my calls, but the phone records proved otherwise. She claimed she had never threatened my father, but the audio recordings played through the courtroom speakers, her voice unmistakable, her words damning. The judge's ruling came 3 weeks later. Valerie's will was declared invalid due to evidence of undue influence and coercion. My father's original estate plan, leaving everything to me, was reinstated. Valerie was entitled to a minimum spousal share under Maryland law, but the house, the savings, the pension, all of it came to me exactly as my father had intended. I stood outside the courthouse after the ruling, looking up at the gray Baltimore sky, feeling the weight of the past months finally beginning to lift. I had lost my father. I had almost lost my family. But I had not lost the truth. Chen called that evening to congratulate me. "Your father would be proud," he said. "You fought exactly the way he hoped you would. I couldn't have done it without you. Everything you did, coming to the funeral, presenting the evidence, testifying, none of this would have been possible without you. Your father knew I would help. That's why he reached out to me." Chen paused. "He used to tell me stories about you, you know. When you were a little girl, when you were in high school, when you enlisted. He was always talking about his Nikki, always proud of everything you accomplished." I felt tears prick at my eyes. I wish I could have talked to him one more time, just to say goodbye. You did say goodbye. Through those videos, through the messages he left for you. He knew he was dying, Nikki. He made sure his last words to you would survive. That night, I watched my father's videos again, all 12 of them, absorbing every word, every expression, every moment of connection that Valerie had tried to steal. He was gone, but his voice remained. His love remained. The truth he had fought so hard to preserve remained. And I would carry all of it forward for the rest of my life. 1 year after my father's funeral, I stood in the living room of the house where I had grown up, looking at the photographs I had restored to their rightful places on the walls. My mother and father on their wedding day, my father holding me as an infant, family gatherings and holidays and ordinary moments that had been preserved in frames and albums. Valerie had removed most of these photographs during her marriage to my father, replacing them with generic art and pictures of herself. But they had not been destroyed, just hidden, stored in boxes in the attic that she had apparently forgotten about. I had found them during the process of reclaiming the house, along with other treasures from my parents' life together that Valerie had tried to erase. The house was mine now, legally and emotionally. I had spent the past year renovating, updating, making it a place where I could live when I was not deployed. Commander Chen had helped me coordinate the work from Pearl Harbor, recommending contractors and checking in regularly to see how things were progressing. Our relationship had evolved over the past year into something I had not expected. What had begun as a professional connection, maintained at my father's request, had become a genuine friendship. Chen understood my grief in a way that few others could, having known my father, having witnessed the struggle to expose Valerie, having been part of the fight for truth and justice. We talked weekly now, sometimes about work, sometimes about family, sometimes about nothing in particular. He had become an anchor for me, a connection to both my father's memory and my own future. The rest of my family had worked to repair the damage Valerie had caused. Aunt Regina called me every Sunday, making up for the months when she had believed lies about me. My cousins had organized a proper memorial for my father, held on what would have been his 59th birthday, celebrating the man he had really been rather than the fiction Valerie had constructed. Valerie herself had faded into obscurity. After losing the estate case, she had moved out of state, presumably searching for another target. I did not know where she was, and I did not care. She was gone from my life, gone from my family, gone from the narrative of my father's legacy. The truth had set me free. Not just the legal truth that had been established in court, but the emotional truth that my father had worked so hard to preserve. He had never stopped loving me. He had never believed I abandoned him. He had fought for me with every ounce of strength he had left, using his intelligence and his connections to ensure that the lies Valerie told would not stand. I thought about his final message often, the one he had recorded just days before his death. He had looked into the camera with tired eyes and told me that I was his heart, that I always had been, that no one could ever take that away. Those words were my inheritance, more valuable than any money or property. Commander Chen arrived on a Friday evening, having taken leave to visit for the weekend. I picked him up at the airport and drove him to the house, watching his expression as he took in the changes I had made. "It looks like a home again," he said, standing in the living room and looking at the photographs on the walls. Leonard would love what you've done. I tried to make it what he would have wanted. What my mother would have wanted. I gestured toward the kitchen. I found her recipe box in the attic. Valerie had shoved it in a corner, probably planning to throw it away eventually. But it survived. That's the thing about truth, Chen said. It survives. No matter how hard people try to bury it, it finds a way to come out. We had dinner together and then walked to the cemetery where my father was buried beside my mother. The evening was warm, the sky clear, the kind of peaceful night that made you feel like the universe was in order. I knelt beside my father's grave and placed fresh flowers on the stone. "Thank you, Daddy," I said quietly, "for fighting for me, for making sure the truth would survive, for loving me even when you thought I had abandoned you." Chen stood beside me, his presence a comfort. "I brought you something." I reached into my bag and removed a framed photograph, one I had found in my father's belongings. It showed two young men, barely out of their teens, standing with their arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. "Is that your father and mine?" 1985, according to the date on the back. They were about 20 years old. I handed him the frame. "I thought you should have it." Chen stared at the photograph for a long moment, his expression softening with emotion. "I've never seen this one." My dad didn't have many pictures from his younger days. My father kept everything. Every photograph, every letter, every memory. He was like that. I looked at my father's headstone, at the name carved in granite, at the dates that bracketed a life that had ended too soon. He kept you too, in a way. Kept the connection alive, even after your father died. Made sure there would be someone who knew the truth when he couldn't tell it himself. "He was a good man," Chen said. "The best I've ever known." "He was?" I stood and brushed off my knees. "And he raised me to be like him. To value truth. To protect the people I love. To fight even when fighting seems impossible." We walked back to the house in comfortable silence, the photograph of our fathers tucked carefully under Chen's arm. 2 generations of friendship, spanning decades, culminating in a moment that neither of us had anticipated, but both of us cherished. I thought about the future stretching ahead of me. My Navy career, continuing under the command of a man who had proven himself in ways that went far beyond professional duty. My family, healed and reunited, bound together by the truth my father had preserved. My home, restored and renewed, a foundation for whatever came next. And my father's legacy, not just the house and the money, but the lesson he had taught me in his final months. That truth cannot be permanently buried. That love finds a way. That even when everything seems lost, there are people who will fight for you if you give them the chance. Commander Chen had known better than to believe Valerie's lies, not because he had special insight, but because my father had trusted him with the truth, and the truth in the end had set us all free. The following spring, I received orders for a new assignment, instructor duty at Great Lakes Naval Training Center in Illinois. It was a prestigious position, a chance to shape the next generation of sailors, and a significant step in my career. But it also meant leaving Pearl Harbor, leaving Commander Chen's direct command. We discussed it over dinner the night before I was scheduled to depart for the mainland. "You've earned this," Chen said. "Your performance reviews have been outstanding, and your record speaks for itself. You're going to be an excellent instructor. I'll miss Pearl Harbor." I looked out at the ocean, visible from the restaurant where we sat. "I'll miss the team. And I'll miss—" I hesitated, uncertain how to finish the sentence. "We'll stay in touch," he said, understanding what I could not say. "Your father would expect nothing less." I laughed, feeling the bittersweet ache of leaving. He always did meddle in my life, even now. He wanted what was best for you. He always did. Chen raised his glass. "To Leonard Harrison, the best godfather a man could ask for." "To Dad?" I clinked my glass against his. "And to the friend who kept his promise." The move to Illinois was easier than I expected. I threw myself into instructor duty, discovering a talent for teaching that I had not known I possessed. The young recruits reminded me of myself at their age, eager and uncertain, ready to become something greater than they had been. I kept the house in Baltimore, returning whenever leave permitted. Aunt Regina had volunteered to maintain it in my absence, and she took the responsibility seriously, making sure the garden was tended and the rooms were aired out. She called it her penance for believing Valerie's lies, though I told her repeatedly that no penance was necessary. Commander Chen and I stayed in contact as promised. Weekly phone calls became video chats, then occasional visits when our schedules aligned. The friendship that had begun in tragedy deepened into something more complicated, something I was not yet ready to name. On the second anniversary of my father's death, I returned to Baltimore for a small ceremony at his grave. Aunt Regina was there, and my cousins, and Uncle Jerome with his wife. Commander Chen flew in from Pearl Harbor, taking precious leave days to be present. We stood in a circle around the headstone, each of us taking turns to share memories of Leonard Harrison. Aunt Regina told stories from their childhood. Uncle Jerome described their adult friendship. My cousins recalled the uncle who had always been present at family gatherings, always ready with advice or encouragement. When it was my turn, I spoke about what my father had done in his final months. The emails he had sent to Chen, the videos he had recorded, the evidence he had gathered, the plans he had made, the fight he had waged even as his body was failing. He taught me that truth matters, I said, that it's worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. And he showed me that love doesn't end with death. It finds a way to continue, through the people we trust, through the truth we preserve, through the legacy we leave behind. I looked at Commander Chen, who had kept every promise he made to my dying father. Dad knew he couldn't be there to protect me after he was gone, so he made sure someone else would be. He reached out across distance and time and made sure the truth would survive. I placed my hand on the cold granite of the headstone. That's who he was. That's what he taught me. And that's what I'll carry forward for the rest of my life. The ceremony ended and the family dispersed, promising to gather again soon for happier occasions. Chen lingered beside me as the others left. He would be proud of you, he said quietly. The woman you've become, the career you're building, the way you've honored his memory. He would be proud of you too. I looked at this man who had become so important to me, this unexpected gift from my father's foresight. You kept your promise. Everything he asked you to do, you did. He couldn't have asked for a better friend. He was family, Chen said simply. And now, so are you. We walked away from the cemetery together, leaving my father to rest beside my mother in the peaceful ground. The spring sun was warm on my face, and for the first time in 2 years, the grief I carried felt lighter. My father was gone. My mother was gone. But I was not alone. I had my family, reconciled and reunited. I had my career, flourishing and full of promise. I had my home, restored and waiting for me. And I had Commander Marcus Chen, the unexpected blessing that had emerged from my father's careful planning. Everyone had believed my cruel stepmother when she said I abandoned my father, but my Navy commander had known better. He had known the truth, and he had fought for it, and he had helped me reclaim everything that was rightfully mine. The truth had set me free, and my father's love, preserved in emails and videos and the promise of an old friend's son, would guide me forward for the rest of my life.